I'm Diana Sloan, 41, and I spent 6 years training the working dogs that go downrange with Navy SEALs before I pivoted to command. For 15 years, my father called me the dog girl at every family gathering, like the work wasn't real Navy work. The night before I took command of 3 SEAL teams, a young operator I'd never met mocked me at a bar near base, with his squadron's K9 lying at heel beside him. What he didn't know was that the dog was the one I'd raised from 8 weeks old, and the dog hadn't forgotten my voice. Have you ever been called something small by someone who should have called you by your name? Tell me your story in the comments. You are not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to keep your head down and let the truth show up on its own, hit that like button and subscribe. It was the spring of 1995, and my mother was already thin in a way that the kitchen light made worse. I was 9 years old. I set the table the way she had taught me, fork on the folded napkin, knife and spoon together on the right side, and I watched her stand at the sink with her hands in soapy water and her shoulders held very carefully. The way you hold a glass, you have already cracked. My father came home that week from a 6-month deployment. He stood in the doorway in his dungarees, and the house felt instantly smaller and instantly safer, the way the house always did when he came home. And my mother turned from the sink and gave him a smile that I would remember years later as the smile of a woman who already knew what she was leaving us with. My father was a boatswain's mate, a first class then, on his way to chief. He smelled like sun on metal and like ship coffee, which is its own thing. And when he picked my little sister Mallory up off the floor, she squealed the way only a 5-year-old can squeal. He kissed the top of my head once and said, "Hello, Di," and went into the bathroom to shave. I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched him at the mirror, and I understood without being told that the man my father was, when he was home, was the most disciplined version of him I would ever get, and that the version was worth not losing. The bungalow on D Avenue had a back patio with a low concrete wall and a lemon tree my mother had planted the year before I was born. The patio looked across the alley at the back of a Mexican grocery, and beyond that at the back fence of an elementary school, and you could hear the ocean if the wind came in the right direction off the channel. We ate dinner at the kitchen table when my father was home. We ate dinner at the patio table when he was not. My mother told me once, in the summer before she got sick, that the patio table was for when she needed to remember that the sky was always going to outlast the small things. I was 8 years old then. I did not understand the sentence. I would remember the sentence the rest of my life. My mother died in October of that year, in a bed at Naval Medical Center San Diego, with my father holding her hand and me holding my sister's. Her cancer had moved fast. The funeral was at Fort Rosecrans, on the bluff above the Pacific, with the gulls turning over the headstones. The detail offered to fold the flag, and my father said no twice, very politely, and folded it himself. His hands did not shake. My sister cried into his chest, and I held her free hand, and I stood at parade rest because I had seen it on television, and I thought that was what he wanted from me. He told me later that day, on the drive home through Point Loma, to be useful, Di. That's all I am asking. I was 10 years old, and I learned that useful was a word that could mean love. The years after my mother died compressed into a series of tasks. School forms, doctor appointments, the haircut my sister needed the day before picture day. My father deployed and came back and deployed and came back. He made chief in 1998, senior chief in 2001, master chief in 2003. My sister became the family's storyteller, the one who could make him laugh at the dinner table. I became the family's logistics officer, the one who could make his life run. I joined the cross-country team at Coronado High School because running was the 1 hour of the day that did not belong to the house. I was the kind of teenager who kept lists. Lists of bills my father needed to sign when he came home. Lists of permission slips for my sister. Lists of what was in the freezer so the food would not be wasted. The lists were my way of holding the house together, and they were also my way of holding myself together, because I had figured out by the time I was 13 that I was a person who needed to be useful in order to feel like I was a person at all. My mother had given me that, gently and without meaning to, in the last summer of her life. My father reinforced it, less gently, after she was gone. I did not resent any of it. I did not have the vocabulary yet for resentment. I was a child raising a child, and I was very good at it, and I thought being good at it was the whole point. The spring of 2003, when I was 17, I was running an Orange Avenue route after school, and I detoured onto the Coronado Pier because I liked the gulls. A Navy K-9 team was working a drill on the pier deck. a Belgian Malinois in a green training vest, off-led, moving across the planks in a pattern that looked like nothing and meant everything. The handler was a tired-looking woman in her 30s, giving soft commands in what I would later learn was German. I stopped running. I stood at the rail and watched for 40 minutes. I had never in my life seen a dog and a person move together the way these two were moving. When the handler caught me staring, she gave me a small, tired smile. "It's the listening, ma'am," she said. "That's what makes them special. They are listening to you all the way down to the soles of your shoes." I walked home in my running shoes, and I did not tell my father what I had seen. I signed an NROTC contract at San Diego State that fall. My father was proud in the way he was always proud, which was a half smile and a single nod and a hand on the shoulder. He asked what community I was going for, and I said surface warfare because surface warfare was the answer he understood. My sister, who was 14 and eating cereal at the table, said she's going to drive boats. "Dad, just like you." And my father corrected her gently. "Ships, kid, we call them ships." I lay on the dorm bed that night, and I looked at the ceiling and I thought about the Belgian Malinois in the green vest and the woman with the tired smile. And I did not have words for what I was reaching toward, but I knew it had a place for me somewhere, and I knew I was not ready to ask for it out loud yet. My first sea tour ran from 2007 through 2010 on the amphibious assault ship USS Boxer in the Pacific Fleet. I stood officer of the deck watches in heavy weather off Okinawa. I qualified as surface warfare officer and earned my warfare pin from a captain who told me I had the bearing of someone twice my years. When I came home on leave, my father poured me a beer, and we sat on the back patio of the bungalow on D Avenue, and he told me I was doing it right, and it was the warmest I had felt with him since the year my mother died. For 3 years, I was my father's daughter, the way he had always wanted me to be. I would learn later that this was the price of admission, and I would learn how short the admission was. I liked the ship. I liked the rhythm of a watch rotation, the way 1,000 sailors became one piece of machinery on a long deployment, the way the bridge crew at 0300 hours got quieter and more precise as the night wore on. I liked the senior enlisted I worked with, all of whom were variations of my father at different ages, and most of whom told me, in the way men of that generation tell women officers their compliments, that they could see he had raised me right. I did not correct them. I let my father have the credit. I knew there was no other currency in the room. I knew that what I was building, in those 3 years on the Boxer, was a credential my father could spend at the Foreign Wars Hall, and I was glad to give it to him, because it was the first thing I had ever been able to give him that he wanted to receive. But under the ship's hum, in the hours when I was off watch and sitting on a folding chair on the flight deck under the stars, I was thinking about the Belgian Malinois on the pier in 2003. I was thinking about the woman with the tired smile and the soft German commands. I was thinking about a navy that I did not yet have a credential to enter, but that I knew, the way you know the weather is going to turn, was the one I was going to spend my life inside. In the spring of 2010, I submitted my detailing preferences, and I listed the Naval Special Warfare Support Activity, Multi-Purpose Canine Billet, as my number 1. I had been thinking about the pier since I was 17. I was selected. I walked into the kennels at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado on my first morning, and I saw a year-old Malinois named Vega working a building clearance drill with a senior chief handler. The senior chief caught me watching. He told me to come back at 0500 hours the next morning with running shoes. "If you can keep up with this dog for a month, ma'am," he said, "you can keep up with the program." I came back the next morning. I kept up. I told my father about the new billet over Sunday dinner that June. My sister was at the table, 21, home from her junior year at the University of San Diego, telling a story about a wedding she had run that weekend in La Jolla. I waited for a gap, and I told him I had been selected for the multi-purpose canine program. I described it with too much excitement. My father chewed a piece of bread for a long time before he answered. "Dogs," he said. "It's a new community, Dad," I said. "The SEALs are spinning up an MPC program, and I'm part of the first cadre." "Dogs, Di," he said. My sister looked down at her plate. The dinner ended politely. He did not say I was wasting myself. He did not have to. He said dogs the way you'd say weather, like it was something that happened to you instead of something you chose. The first time I heard him call me the dog girl was at the Veterans of Foreign Wars post on a Saturday morning in October of 2011. I had driven him over for a breakfast he went to once a month. An old surface chief from his boxer days was at the bar and asked how I was doing. My father clapped him on the shoulder and gestured at me and said, "Yeah, the dog girl is good." The old chief laughed. I laughed too because everyone was laughing, and that is what you do. I sat at the bar with a cup of bad coffee and watched my father across the room, and I understood that he had chosen a new word for me and that the word had a ceiling. I made lieutenant in 2011 and lieutenant commander in 2017. By 2014, I had established the standard SEAL working dog handler curriculum. And by 2016, I had personally validated the first cohort of multi-purpose canines placed with Naval Special Warfare Group 1. The work was the most demanding thing I had ever done. I learned to think in two languages at once, English and German, because the dogs were trained on German operational commands. I learned to read a working dog's shoulders the way an old surface mate reads the horizon. I learned that the best handlers were quiet people who could hold their attention on one animal for 16 hours without breaking. I tried to become that kind of person. The dogs came to us mostly from Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, where the Air Force ran the Joint Canine Procurement Program for the entire Department of Defense. I made the trip to Lackland 4 times a year for selection boards. I watched 8-week-old puppies do drives on tug toys, and I marked the ones who locked on a target the way only a small percentage of dogs ever lock on anything. I marked the ones who could be in a room with a sudden loud noise and turn toward the noise instead of away from it. I marked the ones who watched the handler's face when the handler stopped talking. Those were the dogs who came back to Coronado with me. I worked them from puppyhood through 10 months of foundational obedience, 6 months of detection work, 4 months of bite work, and a final operational certification that took 2 weeks and broke as many candidate dogs as it passed. The ones who passed went to the SEAL squadrons. The ones who washed went to other agencies or to civilian families. I kept track of every dog I had placed. I had a notebook in my desk drawer at the kennels with their working names and their squadron assignments and their handlers' names, and I updated it every quarter. By 2020, I had placed 41 operational multi-purpose canines into Naval Special Warfare. Echo would be the 43rd and the last one before I moved on. In the winter of 2013, I brought a Belgian Malinois named Tor home for a weekend during his decompression cycle. My sister came by for lunch at the bungalow on D Avenue. Tor was the most disciplined animal she had ever seen. He lay at my feet under the kitchen table and did not move when her phone fell off the counter onto the tile floor. My sister watched the dog for a long time and then watched me. "So what is it that you actually do for work?" she asked in a tone that surprised me because it was the first time I had heard her ask it like she meant it. I started to explain. Her phone buzzed. She took the call. The explanation ended. I washed 2 plates at the sink. Tor lay at my feet. I was alone in the house I grew up in with a dog who understood me better than anybody in my family did. And I was 28 years old, and I told myself I was not lonely. I selected Echo from Lackland Air Force Base in May of 2021. He was 8 weeks old, and he weighed 12 pounds, mostly ears. The selection room at Lackland that morning had 9 puppies in it. The first 8 were good. Echo was the 9th. He was sitting in the middle of the floor when I walked in, watching the door. And when I crouched down, he came to me at a perfect working trot for a dog who did not yet know what a trot was. And he sat at my left knee and looked up at me as if he had been waiting his whole 8 weeks for me to arrive. I signed for him in 20 minutes. I drove him back to Coronado in a crate on the passenger seat of my Subaru, and I talked to him the entire 7 hours about who he was going to be. I told him he was going to a squadron of SEALs. I told him the names of the men he would meet. I told him about the back kennel at NAB Coronado, and about the obstacle course, and about the long line drill, and about the day. The long line drill, and about the day. 2.5 years out, when he would clear his first operational building in a place I would not be able to know about. He listened. He slept. He woke up at the gas station outside Yuma, and looked at me through the crate bars as if confirming I was still the person who had said all those things to him. I trained him in the backyard of the kennels for 10 months. I taught him to clear a building and to alert on explosives and to ignore a pigeon at 3 feet, and I taught him to hold a heel position in front of strangers because working dogs do not perform. I taught him the German commands. Sits for sit, Platz for down, here for come, fuss for heel, voraus for forward, bleib for stay, frei for release. I taught him with my voice, not with a clicker, because I wanted him to attach the word to me first and to the action second, the way a child learns a language. By the time he was 10 months old, he was the most precise young dog I had ever trained, and that was when I knew he was going to be the last one. I handed him off to Senior Chief Special Warfare Operator Calvin Boyer's squadron in February of 2022, in a brief ceremony at the kennel gate that I had not made a ceremony out of, because Echo did not need one. I shook Calvin's hand, and I told him that this dog was the best work I had ever done. Calvin held my eyes for a beat and said, "Ma'am, then I am going to take very good care of him." He did. I watched Echo walk out of the kennel yard at Calvin's left side in the working harness I had fitted to him the week before, and I did not let myself look at him for longer than the 5 seconds my dignity allowed. Then I went to my command track screening board. I made commander that year and reported as executive officer to a SEAL team at Coronado. I made commanding officer of a Naval Special Warfare Unit in 2023. I was selected for captain below the zone in 2024 and pinned on the Eagles in 2025. By the spring of 2026, I was the deputy commander of Naval Special Warfare Group 1, and I had a change of command on the calendar for the morning of June 8th, when I would take the colors from Captain Lewis Crow and become the Commodore. My father called me the dog girl in March of that year, in a phone call where he was meant to be congratulating me on the announcement of the command billet. I did not correct him. I did not have it in me anymore to correct him. My sister sent a text message that said, "Congrats, sis." She did not call. My father told me, the week before the change of command, that he probably could not make the drive down from Bakersfield. The drive is 4 hours, and he had made it for my sister's college graduation in 2013 without complaint. I said I understood. I did not. I had spent 15 years being polite about the only word my father would use for me, and I was 41 years old, and I was tired. The Pier Tap is a sailor's bar on Orange Avenue, 2 blocks south of the gate at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. It is well lit. The ceiling is pressed tin painted a deep cream that the light catches and throws back into the room. It has a long L-shaped mahogany counter and a row of stools and 8 or 10 tables along the wall, with a strip of taxidermy mounted high in the corner above the back bar that nobody who works there can quite remember the origin of. The Padres game runs on the television above the back bar with the sound muted, and a black and white photograph of the Coronado ferry from 1951 hangs above the cash register. The bartender on Sunday evenings is a woman named Marisol who has worked the bar for 20 years and who pours generously without being asked when she likes the look of you. I walked into the Pier Tap on Sunday, June 7th, 2026 at 1840 hours, and I took the second stool from the end of the bar, and I ordered a bullet rye, neat. I was in dark jeans and a fitted cream knit top. My hair was loose and blonde, and I was wearing no jewelry. I had come from the Group 1 compound, where I had spent the afternoon reading the change of command order one more time. I sat with my back to the room. I wanted 10 minutes of nothing. I had not eaten dinner. I had not made dinner plans. I had stopped at the Pier Tap because the Pier Tap was on the way home, and because the rye at the Pier Tap was the only rye in walking distance of my townhouse that did not taste like a bad birthday party. I had not been to the Pier Tap in 8 months. The last time I had been there had been on the night I pinned on the Eagles for captain, and I had sat at the same stool and had the same drink, and I had thought about my mother, and I had thought about my father, and I had walked home. I was sitting at the same stool that Sunday evening for the same reasons, and I had not even named those reasons to myself out loud, because I had not had the energy to name anything for the last week. I was tired. Tomorrow was a big morning. Tonight I wanted 10 minutes of nothing. The SEALs were at a back corner table. There were 4 of them. The man who saw me first was Petty Officer First Class Wes Hagan, 29 years old, a fire team leader on a quiet Liberty Sunday with 4 beers in him. With him were Petty Officer First Class Tate Bromley, Petty Officer Second Class Quincy Vinciguerra, and Senior Chief Special Warfare Operator Calvin Boyer, the squadron's lead K9 handler. The squadron's working dog, a Belgian Malinois named Echo, who was 5 years old that May, was in working harness, lying at perfect heel beside Boyer's chair. None of the 4 men were in uniform. They were drinking beer and laughing at a story Hagan was telling about a tourist who had tried to walk into the BUD/S compound looking for a bathroom. Hagan was the loud one at the table. Bromley was the one laughing along. Vinciguerra was the one drinking the slowest. Boyer was the one with the dog at his feet, listening to the story but not participating in it, the way the senior man in any group is always slightly outside the group's center. Hagen saw me at the bar. He turned the story toward me. He said, loud enough to carry the room, "Wrong bar, sweetheart. The wine bar is 2 blocks down." Bromley laughed. Vinciguerra laughed. Boyer did not. I did not turn. I lifted my glass and took a small swallow of the rye, and I set the glass back down on the bar, and I asked Marisol the bartender, at conversational volume, "Could I get a glass of water, please?" Marisol's eyes flicked once to the table and once back to me, and she poured the water and slid it across the bar without comment. She had been the bartender at the Pier Tap for 20 years. She had seen worse. She had also seen better. She was not going to make this any of her business unless I asked her to. Echo lifted his head. His ears, square at the tips, snapped forward. I didn't see him do it because my back was to him. Boyer saw him do it. Boyer put his hand on the harness on instinct. Echo did not move yet. Then Boyer said, "Lo, Echo, sits." Echo did not sit. Echo turned his head toward the bar and locked on me. Hagen turned. Bromley and Vinciguerra turned. Boyer said it again, sharper. "Echo, sits." Echo walked. He cleared Boyer's chair and threaded between Vinciguerra's legs and crossed the bar floor in a perfect working gait. Head level, shoulders square, no urgency and no hesitation. He arrived at my stool and sat in formal heel position on my left side. Square shoulders, head up, eyes forward. His right shoulder was 2 inches from my left knee. It was the exact position I had taught him at 8 months old in a training yard on the backside of NAB Coronado in 2021. The bar went quiet. Marisol stopped mid-pour. The Padres game continued without sound. Hagen came out of his chair fast because he was mortified. His dog, his squadron's dog, the most disciplined working animal he had ever met, had just broken protocol in public for a woman in jeans at the bar. He crossed the floor in 5 steps, half apology and half recovery, hand half out for the harness. He stopped 3 feet behind me. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm really sorry. He's a working dog, he doesn't." "Ma'am, I don't know what is happening." I did not turn yet. I set my glass down. I looked down at Echo. I said, "At conversational volume, Echo." His tail did not move. His body tightened. It was the working dog version of joy, which is recognition without celebration, which is exactly what I had taught him to do. I said the next word in clean German, the way I had taught it to him 5 years before in the dirt of the back kennel. "Boros." Echo dropped from heel and lay down at my feet, chin between his paws, eyes still on me. Boyer was on his feet by then. He had crossed half the distance from his table to the bar, and he had stopped because he had seen the whole shape of it before Hagen had. His face changed. "Captain Sloan," he said. Behind me, Hagen said, "Who?" Boyer said it louder. "Captain Sloan." "Ma'am, I didn't see you come in." I turned on my stool then. I looked at Boyer, and I looked at Hagen, and I looked back at Echo. "Senior Chief," I said. "He's looking well." Boyer's voice was steady and quiet. "He's the best dog in the squadron, ma'am." "He always has been?" I nodded. Hagen behind me had now connected the name Sloan to the printed memo that had been on every Group 1 bulletin board for 3 weeks, announcing the change of command at 0900 hours the next morning. His face went the kind of white that does not come back to color quickly. The door of the Pier Tap opened. Master Chief Special Warfare Operator Reggie Inman walked in. He was 51 years old, 28 years in Naval Special Warfare, the senior enlisted SEAL in Group 1. He had come to meet Boyer for the late shift. He saw Boyer at attention. He saw Echo lying at my feet. He saw Hagen standing 10 feet behind me looking like he had been shot. And he read the scene in under 3 seconds, the way Master Chiefs do. He took 1 step into the bar and he said, "Parade deck loud, attention on deck." Every SEAL in the room stood up. There were 6 of them, scattered at 3 tables, none of them in uniform. Hagen stood up. He squared his shoulders. He put his arms straight down his sides. He did not look at me. Bromley stood. Vinciguerra stood. Boyer was already at attention. 2 operators I did not recognize at a table by the window stood. A retired Master Chief named Earl Whitaker, at the bar, 3 stools down, who was 80 years old and had served in Vietnam and who came to the pier tap every Sunday for one whiskey at exactly 18:45 hours, stood. The bar held the position. I finished my whiskey in one slow swallow. I laid a $20 bill on the bar and pushed it toward Marisol. I turned to Inman. "Master Chief," I said. "As you were. Please." "Ma'am," he said. The bar did not relax until I looked down at Echo and said softly, "Blibe." Echo stayed where I had left him. I walked past Hagen to the door. I did not look at him. I did not need to. I walked out into the Coronado evening. The light was that particular gold the Pacific gives you for about 20 minutes in June before it goes pink. I stood on the sidewalk for a second and I took a breath of salt air. Then I walked the 4 blocks home. The Glorieta Boulevard townhouse was dark when I came in. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, and I walked to the kitchen island, and I sat down on the stool, and I laughed once, dry into the silence of the house. Then I called Commander Priya Mahesh. Priya was my group operations officer, and she was the only person in the world I called when I needed to think out loud. She answered from her own kitchen. I told her the entire pier tap scene in 3 sentences. She was quiet for the right number of beats. "Diana," she said, "the dog walked across the bar to you." "Yes," I said, "and the boy who called you sweetheart is going to be standing in your formation in 12 hours. "Yes," I said. She laughed softly. "I would say I am sorry," she said, "but I am not actually sorry." We talked for an hour. Priya, who had known me since the lieutenant commander course at Newport in 2018, named the things she and I had circled for the last 2 years. The way my father's voice got short on the phone. The way my sister's calls stopped coming back. The way every command billet I had taken had been marked by my family with a smaller and smaller acknowledgement, until the last one, the deputy job in 2024, had been marked with a single text message from my sister that said, "Congrats, sis." "It isn't only about tomorrow, is it?" Priya said. "No," I said. "Tell me what it is about," I told her. The Foreign Wars Post in 2011. The Sunday dinner with my sister and the dog who did not flinch when the phone fell. The 15 years of being introduced as the dog girl at every family event I had ever attended. The text last Tuesday from my father saying he probably could not make the drive down from Bakersfield for the ceremony in the morning. I had spent 15 years being polite about the only word my father would use for me. I was not going to be polite at 0900 hours. The morning had nothing to do with him, but I was going to have to live the next 15 years with what he had named me, and I was very tired. Priya did the thing she always does when I am laying something out for her, which is to wait the long beat that lets me hear the shape of what I have just said. Then she said, "Diana, you have done a thing tonight that you have never done in any of the years I have known you. You have said the sentence out loud." I said, "What sentence?" She said, "The sentence that says he has been wrong about you for 15 years. You have never said it out loud before." I said, "I know." She said, "It does not become less true tomorrow, because you take a Group 1 command. You have known the sentence was true for a long time. You will know it tomorrow. Take the colors and let the rest of it take the time it is going to take." I said, "That is what I am going to do." She said, "Good. Get some sleep, Commodore." The call ended at 19:55. I stood at my kitchen window and I watched the lights of Coronado Cays across the channel. I thought about Echo's posture in the bar, the exact angle of his shoulders, the way he had not wagged his tail because he knew the room was watching and he had been trained by me that working dogs do not perform. I thought about Hagen's face. I thought about whether Hagen was salvageable. I decided he was. Then I went to bed. I woke at 0, 4, 10 hours the next morning because I always do. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long minute and I thought about my mother. About Linda Sloan in 1995, in the hospital bed at Naval Medical Center, holding my hand and telling me, in a voice so quiet you had to lean in, to be the woman I would be, even if no one was watching. I had been 10 years old. I had thought at the time that she was telling me how to behave at the funeral. I understood now, on a Monday morning in June, 31 years later, that she had been telling me how to live a whole life. I went to the closet and I pulled out my service dress, white uniform, with the row of ribbons above the left breast pocket and the gold cord I would wear today for the first time as Commodore. The change of command was at 0900 hours on the parade field at the Naval Special Warfare Group 1 compound. under a clear San Diego June sky. 3 SEAL teams in dress whites in formation. The outgoing Commodore Captain Lewis Crowe, 53 years old, 29 years in Naval Special Warfare, standing at the dais. The presiding officer was Rear Admiral Upper Half Howell Renfro, the commander of Naval Special Warfare Command. I entered from stage left at 08:59 hours and took my seat. I did not look for my father. I had stopped looking for my father. I looked at the formation. I found Petty Officer First Class Wes Hagen in the 3rd rank of his team's formation. His eyes were forward. I let my gaze move on. Admiral Renfro read the orders. Captain Crowe was relieved. I assumed command. The Group 1 colors were passed from Crowe to Renfro to me in the exact choreography I had watched in the practice video 3 times. The Force Master Chief called the formation to present arms, and 3 teams of SEALs saluted the new Commodore, and I returned the salute, and I gave 42 seconds of remarks in which I thanked the outgoing Commodore, named the 3 teams by their battle honors, and committed myself to the operators and the families. I did not mention dogs. I did not have to. Hagen found me in the wardroom at the reception 45 minutes later. He stood 8 feet from me in dress whites in front of his team master chief and 3 of his own team officers, and he said, "Parade ground volume, ma'am. Petty Officer First Class Wes Hagen. I owe you an apology from last night. It was out of line, and it will not happen again." I held his eyes for a beat longer than was comfortable. "Petty Officer Hagen," I said. "Apology accepted. Get back to your team." He went. Master Chief Inman, behind him, gave me the smallest possible nod. The nod said, "I have him. I will handle this." The wardroom was the kind of room a working Navy unit builds over decades. The walls were dark wood, the carpet was a deep navy blue, the unit shields of every SEAL team in Naval Special Warfare hung along the upper wall in matched frames. There was a long oak table in the center with 30 chairs and a sideboard at the far end, set with coffee and a sheet cake my staff had ordered in honor of the change of command. The room was full of captains, commanders, senior chiefs, and master chiefs in dress whites with a scattering of family members, and the volume in the room was the steady, deep murmur that a Navy unit at attention makes when it has been told it is at ease. I worked the room for an hour. I shook hands. I asked captains about their wives by name. I asked master chiefs about their grandchildren. I did the work that a new commander does in the first hour of a new command, which is to remind every person in the room that you know they are there and that you intend to know them better. At 1100 hours, Boyer brought Echo through the wardroom for the customary K9 detachment greet. Echo was at heel on Boyer's left, harness on. Perfect. Boyer presented the dog. I went down on one knee, briefly, the way I would for any working animal, and I ran my palm under Echo's jaw and I said nothing. His tail moved once. I stood. "Senior Chief," I said. "Carry on." "Ma'am," he said. The room watched because the room could not help watching. The room understood. The room moved on. At 1700 hours, I was alone in my new office, the office that had been Lewis Crowe's office at 0800 hours, and that was mine now. The desk was bare, except for the change of command program, a unit coin Crowe had pressed into my hand at lunch, and a printed photograph someone had slid under my door at some point during the day. The photograph was of Echo at 8 months old, in a training yard on the backside of NAB Coronado, sitting at heel on my left, square shoulders, head up, eyes forward. The exact posture he had held in the pier tap the night before. There was no note. I knew Boyer's handwriting. I knew he had not used any. I knew with the certainty you get only from being recognized by somebody who has paid attention to you for a long time without saying so, that this was a quiet salute from one professional to another, and that it was the only one he would ever give me. I looked at the photograph for a long time, then I opened my top drawer, slid the photograph in face up, and closed the drawer. I had work to do. The summer went by. I ran Group 1. Master Chief Inman took Wes Hagen aside on the morning of June 9th, and they had a 40-minute conversation in Inman's office that nobody else heard. The first 30 minutes of the conversation were Inman talking and Hagen looking at the carpet. The last 10 minutes were Inman asking Hagen one question, which was, what kind of operator do you want to be when you are sitting where I am sitting? Hagen did not answer for a long time. When he did, his answer was short and acceptable. Inman put him on the senior enlisted mentorship track and assigned him to volunteer 2 evenings a week at the squadron's K9 yard. "You are going to learn how that dog works, Hagen," Inman said, "and I learned this later. You are going to learn it from the inside. You are going to learn what it cost the woman whose name is on the Commodore's door to put that dog into your fire team. Are we clear?" "Hoo-yah, Master Chief," Hagen said. He started the next evening. He was not bad with dogs. He was, it turned out, quietly good with them. I dropped by the K9 yard on a Saturday morning in July unannounced because Saturdays were when I did not have meetings. Boyer was running an obstacle drill with 2 of the squadron's working dogs, and Hagen was standing at the long line end of a lane, holding the line for a young Malinois. I watched for 10 minutes from the gate. Hagen was running the line with the kind of attention that you cannot fake. The kind I had spent 6 years trying to teach lieutenants who would never quite get there. He was watching the dog's shoulders. He was watching the dog's ears. He was correcting with a soft voice. He was praising with a softer one. He was, I realized as I watched, exactly the kind of operator who could become very good at this. Given a few hundred more hours and the patience of a senior chief, like Calvin Boyer, to teach him. Hagen did not see me. He was too focused. I left without speaking to anyone. I drove home along Coronado's Silver Strand with the windows down and the salt coming through the car. And I thought about the difference between the boy in the pier tap on a Sunday evening with 4 beers in him and the man on the long line in a K9 yard on a Saturday morning, and I thought about what categories I myself had been put into when I was 29, and what I had wanted somebody, anybody, to do for me in those categories that nobody had quite known how to do. I told Priya on the phone that night that the boy had more in him than the bar suggested. "You're already saving him," she said. "I am not saving anyone, Mahesh," I said. "I am observing." My father did not call me through June or through most of July. He had not made the change of command, and he had not asked about it after. I did not push. I had work. I was running Group 1. I had the first deployment cycle of my command coming up in September, and I was the kind of busy that lets you not feel things for whole weeks at a time. On the afternoon of July 24th, my father walked into the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Post 5256 in Bakersfield, for a coffee. And a retired senior chief named Sam Doolin sat down on the next stool. Doolin had served at NAB Coronado for 11 years before he retired and moved to Bakersfield 2 summers earlier. He asked my father how I was. My father said what he always said. "Yeah, the dog girl is good. She's out at Coronado." Doolin set his coffee down. "Gus," he said. "You know she took Group 1 last month, right?" My father said, "She took what?" Doolin told him. He told him about the change of command. He told him, because he had heard it from a senior chief who had been there, about the dog walking the length of the pier tap the night before, and sitting at heel on my left, and about what Master Chief Inman had said when he walked in. My father did not speak for 2 minutes, then he said he had to get home. He left the coffee on the bar. He sat at his kitchen table that evening with a yellow legal pad and a Bic pen. He started a letter 3 times and crumpled the first 2. He did not finish the 3rd start that night either. He put the pad in the drawer where he kept the bills. He came back to it 8 times over the next 2 weeks. The letter arrived in my mailbox on Glorieta Boulevard on August 9th, 2 pages of yellow legal pad paper in my father's blocky shipboard handwriting, folded twice in a white envelope. The letter was short. "D," he wrote. "I should have known what you did and I didn't ask. I called you the dog girl and I thought I was being friendly. I want to know now. Tell me when you can. Your father." I read the letter at the kitchen island. I read it twice. I put it in a manila folder in the desk drawer above the photograph of Echo. I did not call him that night. I called him on Sunday and we talked for 47 minutes and I explained for the first time what a multi-purpose canine actually is. And my father listened. My sister showed up on a Saturday afternoon in October. She had driven down from La Jolla. She had not called ahead. She knocked once. I opened the door in athletic shorts and a San Diego State t-shirt with my hair in a ponytail. She held up a small wrapped frame. "I owe you an entire decade of conversations," she said. I brought one. I let her in. The framed photograph was of Echo in working harness, taken by a Pulitzer-nominated military photographer she had hired 3 years before, for an event in Coronado without knowing the dog in the photograph had anything to do with me. She had seen the photograph in a hallway at the Hotel del Coronado the weekend before, and read the caption and put it together for the first time. She told me the story at my kitchen island. I laughed, briefly, the dry laugh I do not give to many people. You met him before I told you about him, I said. I met him because of you and I didn't know it, she said. I'm tired of not knowing it. She cried. I did not. I made tea. Then she said the harder thing, the thing she had been rehearsing in the car on the way down. Dad called you the dog girl because Dad didn't have words for what you did, she said. I called you the dog girl because Dad did. I'm not Dad. I know you're not Dad, I said. I don't think I do, though, she said. I have spent 20 years performing for him, and I have called you a thing I did not understand, because performing for him was easier than understanding you. I am not telling you to forgive me. I am telling you I see it. I took a long breath. Mallory, I said, I am very tired of being the family's exhibit. I would like very much to be your sister. She nodded. She said yes. The afternoon went quiet for a long time. We watched a Padres game on the couch and we did not talk about any of it. She stayed for dinner. We walked down to the bay at sunset and we watched the light go behind Point Loma. She asked me, for the first time in her adult life, what I actually did at work. I answered, for the first time in my adult life, without compressing it for the listener. The answer took 35 minutes. She did not interrupt. I told her about the puppies at Lackland and the 8 months it took to teach a working dog to ignore a pigeon at 3 feet, and the way you have to learn to read shoulders before ears, and how the best handlers in the program were quiet people who could hold their attention on one animal for 16 hours without breaking. I told her about Echo. I told her how I had selected him and how I had driven him back to Coronado in the crate on the passenger seat, and how I had handed him off at the gate. When I finished, she said, I am going to start calling you Diana, not Sis. Diana, that's your name, and I have not used it enough. I said, very quietly, thank you. She drove back to La Jolla after coffee on Sunday morning. She texted me from the interstate at 10:42 a.m. The text said, drive safe today. Hug Echo for me. I stood in my kitchen and I read the text and I put my phone down and I did not move for a long minute. Then I texted my father a picture of the framed photograph my sister had hung above my couch. He texted back 20 minutes later, a single line. That's a good dog, Di. Time passed. Group 1 ran 4 major deployment cycles in 12 months under my command. Echo continued to serve with Boyer's Squadron, ran 3 operational deployments, and started to slow at the hips, the way Belgian Malinois eventually do. Wes Hagen, 2 years out from the pier tap, made chief on his first look. My sister came down for visits, then for weekends, then for a Thanksgiving. My father and I had a standing Sunday phone call that ran an average of 28 minutes. Nothing was resolved, everything was shifting. The work knew what I was, the dog knew what I was, the morning knew what I was, and the people who loved me finally were beginning to catch up. On the afternoon of Friday, November 12th, 2027, Senior Chief Calvin Boyer knocked on the door of my office at 14:30 hours. He was in service uniform. He asked for 5 minutes. Echo was with him. Echo was in his pet collar today, not the working harness, and he lay down on my office rug without being told. Boyer sat in the chair across from my desk. He put a single folded sheet of paper on the desk. Ma'am, he said. The detachment veterinarian assessed Echo at his quarterly yesterday. His hips are showing wear consistent with 5 years of operational running. He is still fully cleared today. He will not be cleared in 6 months. I am recommending him for retirement at the end of this calendar year. I read the page. I looked at Echo on the rug. I looked at Boyer. He slid a second sheet across the desk. It was a Naval Special Warfare K-9 retirement disposition form. There was a single box for the recommended adopter. Boyer had left the box blank because he was a senior chief and he knew not to write a name into a Commodore's box. I picked up a black pen. I did not write yet. I looked at him. Senior Chief, I said. You raised this dog for 4.5 years. The recommendation is yours to make. His voice was steady. Ma'am, he said, the dog you trained from 8 weeks old is the dog who walked across a bar to you. I am his handler. You're his person. The recommendation is mine to make, and I am making it. I wrote my name in the box. I signed. Echo lifted his head on the rug. Boyer stood. He picked up the form. He started to put it back into his folder. Calvin, I said. It was the first time I had used his first name. Thank you. Ma'am, he said. He left. Echo stayed where he was. I sat down on the rug next to my dog and I put my hand on his shoulder, and I did not say anything for a long time. The afternoon outside the window went slowly gold, and then orange, and then dark. He did not move. I drove Echo home that evening on official orders for the first of his transition weekends. He walked into the townhouse and walked the perimeter once, the way working dogs do, and then he lay down on the rug under the kitchen island as if he had lived there his entire life. I put a bowl of water down. He drank a quarter of it and looked up at me, the working dog version of a question. I sat down on the floor next to him. I said, "This is your house now." He put his head on my knee. He went to sleep in 14 seconds. I sat with my hand on his shoulder, and I watched the light through the kitchen window go from gold to orange to the long blue that the Pacific gives you at the end of a clear day in November. And I did not move for 40 minutes because he was sleeping the deepest sleep I had ever seen him sleep, and a working dog does not give you that sleep unless he has decided the room is safe. I sent my sister a picture. She sent back 6 exclamation points and the word, all in capital letters, finally. I sent the picture to my father. He did not text back for an hour. When he did, the text was one sentence. Send me the address again and a day. I want to meet him. He drove down from Bakersfield on Saturday, February 6th, 2028 in his old Ford pickup. He brought a small paper bag from the bakery on Truxton Avenue. He stood on the front step in a clean polo shirt and the same Padres cap he had worn since 2019. I opened the door. Echo was at my left side, off-led, head up. My father looked at the dog. The dog looked at my father. Very softly, he said, "Hello, Echo." Echo's tail moved once. My father put his hand out, palm down, the way a man who has been around dogs his whole life knows to do. Echo sniffed his hand. Then Echo turned his head and looked up at me for permission. Very quietly, I said, "Frey." Echo leaned against my father's leg. My father's face did something I had not seen it do since the year before my mother died. My sister arrived at noon. She had driven down from La Jolla with a thermos of coffee for the 3 of us and a small canvas tote with sandwiches she had made at 6 in the morning, and she hugged my father on the front step the way you hug a man you have spent 20 years performing for and have now decided to stop performing for, which is to say, briefly and without commentary. The 3 of us and the dog walked on the wet sand at low tide on Coronado Beach. Echo, who had been an operational working dog for 5.5 years and a pet for 10 weeks, was figuring out the surf. He chased a wave once, retreated, gave the ocean a look of professional disapproval, and went back to walking at my left. My father laughed, dry and short, the way he laughs when something hits him. "He is the most disciplined animal I have ever met in my life," he said, to nobody in particular. "He is the best work I have ever done, Dad," I said. My father did not say anything. He put his hand on my shoulder briefly. He took it away. We walked for 1.5 miles down the beach. The wind came in off the ocean and pulled my hair across my face. My sister told a story about a wedding she'd run the month before in Del Mar, where the groom's mother had tried to commandeer the seating chart 20 minutes before the ceremony. My father laughed at the story. He had not laughed at one of my sister's stories in front of me in 5 years. I watched him laugh, and I watched my sister tell the story, and I watched Echo trot along at my left in his retirement collar. And I thought, for the first time in my adult life, that the 4 of us standing on this beach were a family, in the small, ordinary, unshowy sense of the word that I had been looking for since the autumn of 1995. We ate sandwiches my sister had brought on the back patio of the bungalow on D Avenue, which my father still owned and rented out, and which was empty that weekend between tenants. Echo lay in the grass and watched the gulls. My father told the story for the first time aloud of the day my mother died. He said he should have let his daughter see him cry that day. He said he was sorry he didn't. My sister cried. I, finally, after 31 years, cried too. My father put an arm around each of us, and we sat like that on the patio of the house I grew up in, until the light started to change. He went home that Sunday morning. My sister went home that Sunday morning. The townhouse was quiet in the way a house is quiet after the people you have spent your life waiting for have finally come and gone. I washed the coffee cups. I folded the blanket Echo had pulled off the couch overnight. I walked through the rooms once and turned out the lamps in order, the way I do at the end of every day, the same circuit I had walked the first night I had moved into this house 6 years before, when I had been a lieutenant commander, with no command behind me and no command ahead of me, and a future I was holding open with both hands. I sat on the couch under the framed photograph of Echo that my sister had hung in October 2026. Echo was asleep with his chin on my knee. I opened my notebook and I started to draft my own change of command remarks for the next Commodore, 2 years out. I got one paragraph in, and I stopped and I looked at my dog. I closed the notebook, I turned off the lamp. I sat in the dark with my hand on his head, and I listened to the surf 2 blocks away. If you have been called something small by someone who should have called you by your name, I want you to know this. The work knows what you are. The dog knows what you are. The morning knows what you are. And one of these days, the people who love you will catch up. Listen to them when they do, and keep doing the work in the meantime. That night at the pier tap changed everything, and not because anybody got loud. It changed because a dog remembered me at conversational volume and because the people who needed to see it saw it. If you've ever been put in a category that was smaller than you were, I would love to hear how you walked out of it. Was it work that did it? A friend? An animal who knew you better than your own family did? Drop a comment and tell me. And if this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and the bell so the next one finds you when it's ready.